Yasas. What happens when you take two vibrant brothers that are descendants from the Greeks in Constantinople, embracing their American roots, and then ask them to serve up rich tales of traditions, cuisine, childhood memories, and a hearty dose of humor? You're about to find out. This is Baklava Banter, your passport to all things Greek.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Baklava and Banter. My name is Petraki. Soto is off today. On today's episode of Baklava and Banter, we are honored to have, all the way from Yorkshire, England, author of the book, A Corfu Love Affair. Please help us welcome Matt Wells to the show. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Matt, this was A Corfu Love Affair, great book, great character development on this. Before we drill down on the book itself, how does a guy from Yorkshire, England, write about the island of Corfu?
Well, writing about Corfu was very easy for me because I've been visiting that island since my early to mid-20s. So I'm 55 now, so pretty simple to do the math. I've been visiting Corfu on and off over the last 30 years. So it has very, very quickly and very easily become a second home to me. Although I don't spend as much time in Corfu as I do in England, my time spent on Corfu is just as important to me as it is spending. In fact, I'll be honest, I prefer spending my time on Corfu. And because I've been out there so many times and I've travelled all over the island, both by car, on sailboat and on foot, and many years ago by mountain bike, I've got to see so many wonderful places off the beaten track, not only the tourist destinations, but I've got to meet so many people. And I make a point that every year I try to go by and go back and visit the people that I've met previously. So they've become friends. It's not just a holiday destination for me anymore. I take it as second. It's as simple as that.
So when you decided to write this book, what inspired you to write it?
Okay. So I'll give you a very, very quick background as to how the book came about, how the whole idea was born. However you choose to pitch it, I'm either working part-time or semi-retired now. So I'm selective who I say that to. If I think it's going to offend people, I say I just work part-time. If people look at someone who's 55 being semi-retired and only working 20 hours a week now, I hope to take a little bit of inspiration and motivation from that and say, well, how did you achieve it? So I'm selective with what I say. I'm either working part-time or semi-retired. So we'll say I'm semi-retired. But what I do now is I'm just a contract van driver. I do 20 hours a week. So in my own little van, I work for a large distribution company as a contractor, self-employed. So I spend 2 hours a day just out in my van, driving around, delivering small packages, groceries and parcels for a large company. So I don't have the radio on. I don't listen to music. I don't have anyone sat next to me talking to me or asking me questions. So I do a lot of thinking when I'm in my van. And it was just one day I woke up and had this character in my head. I think I was, in fact, it's the opening introduction to the book. Was as I looked out through the living room window across the soggy village green. That is pretty much a description of the village that I live in. My living room window in our old Victorian house looks out across the village green. And quite often in Yorkshire, it's wet and it's grey and it can be very uninspiring. As lovely as the Yorkshire Dales and the Yorkshire Moors are, it is quite a grey place at times. And I had that feeling one morning. I think I was going out to work and it was been raining all night and it was wet and it was still raining and the village green is prone to flooding. And I looked out at the village green and I just thought, this is not inspiring nor motivating at all. And I had that line just come into my head. And then when I was out driving that day, I had this character born in my head that was frustrated with life in Yorkshire. He'd got a passion for Corfu. He was planning a 4-week trip to go back with his sweetheart, that's Kathy or Kat. And he just basically wanted to be in Corfu. He wanted to be in Corfu more than anything, and he wanted to be there with Kathy. And what he was faced with, the reality of what he was faced with that day was 2 hours of driving his van in the rain, feeling completely bored and uninspired. So that day, when I went out and delivered, I started writing the first chapter in my head. And the first chapter was very much an introduction to the characters, which was Max, Kathy, or as Kat as she's known. And I started building the characters in my head as I was driving around. And I got back from going out to work that day, and I sat down and I basically wrote the first chapter in about an hour.
Wow.
It just came out. It was there. The
Yeah.
characters were born. I knew what they looked like. I knew how they felt. I knew how Max was frustrated with his life. I knew that he got a challenge with Kathy still being interested in her career and still with a point
Mm-hmm.
to prove, and that friction between the two characters, which would eventually play out in the book. And
Right.
the first chapter came out in literally 2,500 words. Came out in about an hour, just over. It just flowed. And after the first chapter had been written, I started to think about other people in my life and the people that I'd met and how this was all going to bounce between Yorkshire and London and Corfu.
Mm-hmm.
Over the couple of days, I'd pretty much written the book in my head, or the framework for the book in my head from start to finish within 2 to 3 days. And
Wow.
the whole process started February, March, April. The whole process of writing started, I think, at the end of February, and I'd finished the
Wow.
book by the end of May.
Wow.
So
Wow.
on and off, a couple of hours
Yeah.
on and off.
So, go ahead.
Yeah. And on some occasions, I would sit down and write half a chapter because that was all that was flowing. On some
Yeah.
days, I would sit down and I'd be motivated and I'd be able to write a chapter a day. Other days, if it was raining, I decided not to go out to work. I would sit down and I could write 3 or 4 chapters a day, 10,000 words a day,
Yeah.
because
Wow.
the story was there. It was in my head, and every
Yeah.
time I sat down with my keyboard, it just flowed. It flowed,
Mm-hmm.
flowed, and it just kept coming. I couldn't
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. And it's almost like I told you before we started recording, the story almost felt like autobiographical in some sense that you know, Max, you are, and we discussed this, that, you know, there's a part of Max in you. There's a big part of Max that's in you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's what helped it make it flow, because you were speaking more from experience than creating a fictional character. Even though it is fictional, it's based on more or less your own experiences.
Yeah, very, very much. And I do laugh because you're not the only person that's read the book, obviously, and you're not the only person that's made that connection. And they've said,
Mm-hmm.
Max sounds a lot like you, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
But why didn't you just call him Matt? And there's a little story behind that, because whenever I go
Okay.
away on holiday, my full birth name is Matthew, but nobody calls me Matthew. I think only my mother, before she passed away, was the person that called me Matthew.
Yeah.
Everyone used to call me Matt. But whenever I used to go away, particularly to Greece, people would say, "Oh, what's your name?" I would say Matt, and then they would start calling me Max. So it was, "Oh, what's your name?" Matt. Ah, Max. And then it was just easier to go along with Max, even
Yeah.
though it was Matt. So the
Yeah.
character, yeah, I would say 95% of what you read about Max is me telling the story of my own life through that character in the book.
Yeah. You know, you chose to open your first chapter. You used the Adam and Eve metaphor.
Yeah.
How does that, you think, shape into the emotional part of the story?
Well, the story of I mean, I don't want to give too much away because I want people
Yeah,
to read the story and
of
enjoy it.
course.
Characters to evolve and develop, and I want the people to fall in love with the characters
Mm-hmm.
and follow them through the journey. But the brief story behind Max and Kathy, or as he now calls her, Kat, is that they were childhood sweethearts since they were 15 years of age, and
Right.
together they just celebrated their 30th birthdays, and together they were invincible. They hadn't been with anyone else. They'd had a few minor relationships in
Mm-hmm.
their early teens before they became an item in their when they were both 15, and
Mm-hmm.
they've grown up. They've grown into adults together, knowing only each other. So everything in Max's life is perfect because he doesn't need. Kat gives him everything, and Max provides Kat with everything she wants. So they're this formidable, like Adam and Eve couple that don't know anybody
Mm-hmm.
else. They don't know anybody else's flaws. They don't know anybody else's faults, nor do they know anyone any better. They've just become so perfect together that
Right.
I referred to them, or I think it was Max that said, "Oh, we're Adam and Eve," and then it plants that little seed that can they stay Adam and Eve forever, or will the
Mm-hmm.
life, the challenges that everyone has to deal with throughout our teens and our early 20s and our 30s and 40s. Everyone has challenges in life. And sometimes those challenges keep people together. Sometimes they make relationships stronger. Sometimes they
Exactly.
blow relationships out of the water. And sometimes those relationships are so strong that you can't keep them apart and they end up coming back together. And that really was the whole basis of Max and Kathy, is that they're
Yeah.
set off from start on this journey, and it's gonna take some twists and turns, and life's gonna throw.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you wrote this book, has it has a mixture of romance, travel, almost like a social observation. When you started writing this, was that your intent, or is that what it turned into?
I think I was writing subconsciously,
Okay.
because I'll be brutally honest with you. My wife is an English teacher.
Okay.
So she's very well educated, private
Mm-hmm.
school, university. She's a year 6 English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I left school with no qualifications. I left school with barely enough qualifications to catch a bus. I haven't written anything since I left school, physically. If I had to
Yeah.
sit down and write a letter with a pen on a piece of paper, I couldn't do it. And that's just because of the way that I've lived my life. But
Mm-hmm.
the writing was a very, very subconscious but emotional process, because I think I'd reached a point where I had so many ideas and thoughts and plans and passions and things I would like to be doing spinning around in my head, that it was just coming out in the form of the book. So
Mm-hmm.
it had to have, the characters. It had to have Max and it had to have Kathy. But then a lot of the other characters, like Max's best friend Charlie, is
Mm-hmm.
based around someone that I used to know. And I think every guy knows someone like Lucy, who is Kathy's best friend. And all these people that I've met on my travels started to form the
Mm-hmm.
book. So there was a lot of observation. I'm 55 now, so I've seen a lot in my life. I've seen the highs, I've seen the lows, I've seen the really good stuff, and I've seen the really bad stuff. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of that came out. It was a process of expression, but there was no
Mm-hmm.
structure. I didn't sit down like a lot of authors and plan it all out on spreadsheets and
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Literally, it just came out every time I sat down and started writing it. So I describe it as an emotional subconscious process.
Yeah, because for lack of a better word, it seems like all the characters to some extent are flawed. And with throughout the journey of the book, through self-discovery, they're kind of addressing them. Maybe not all of them, but they're kind of addressing them. And when we look at the inner conflict that Kat is facing, was she, as Max was, as you said, based on you, is Kat based on somebody? Was it totally fictional?
There is an element of character behind Cat, and the again, I want to put this across in a point to make it clear to people that it's not a big issue. But I'll be really honest with you. My wife Emily is 14 years younger than me, so
Okay.
I'm 55. She's 41. So
Okay.
we describe it, and we laugh and joke about the age differences. That
Yeah.
I'm 14 miles up 14 miles up the road, further up the road, 14 years further up the road. So I've reached a
Hmm.
point in my life now where I don't have a career as such. I do things I enjoy doing and make a bit of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas my wife, being slightly younger, is now at the peak of her teaching career and wants to see that through for another few years. And that's completely understandable, bearing in mind the investment that's been made in her teaching
Hmm.
and her university. And she's worked hard to get where she is within the school that she's at. So it's not a relationship bombshell for us, but
Right.
we
Right.
accept the fact that I've reached a point in my life where I don't want a career. I've been there. I don't want to be sitting down at whatever time dealing with emails and being stressed and managing people. The only person in my
Hmm.
life that I manage now is myself.
Yeah.
I've held down jobs where I've managed hundreds of people, and I've been there and I've seen that and I've done it, and I don't need that in my life anymore, which is why I do what I do. I do my writing,
Hmm.
I do my traveling, I do my sailing, and various other bits and bobs and my creative work. And if I make a bit of money, then that's great. Obviously, I need to make money to survive, but I don't need the 6-figure salary anymore. I've made
Right.
decisions
Right.
in allowed me to have this life, which is semi-retirement at 55. So,
Right.
Cat is very much based around the relationship that both Emily and I have. Is that I'm at one point, she's at another point, And instead of it being a bombshell, we make it work, which means that I go off and do things on my own, like my traveling,
Mm-hmm.
does her things, and we come back together and we talk about it and we discuss it and we laugh and joke about it. And eventually, I like to think that our lives will come together in some way, shape, or form,
Sure.
where we will be doing everything that we both enjoy doing all of the time together. But in the meantime, we are like a lot of couples where we have different interests and different
Yeah.
lives, passions, and a bit of that plays out in the two main characters or the lead
Yeah.
characters.
100%. 100%. So talking about this, and there's a lot to this story, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but I feel like if there's anybody out there who's been in a relationship, they'll get this book. They'll feel the emotion of the book, the ups and downs in a relationship. They'll get it. They'll feel it. And the part, like I told you, it's a great book, but there's one part of the book where I said, oh, I was like, Max, I said, oh my God, Max. And I said, Matt, what are you doing here? Because I felt it is when, where at a portion of the book, Matt and Max and Kat, kind of go their own ways in this. And uh, there's another character that comes who could be a potential love interest for Max. And then Kat decides, "Oh, I'm going to come visit you in Corfu," and I'm like, it's like a soap opera now. And I'm waiting. I'm like, "No, what are you doing?" And in my mind, I'm like, "Listen, we've all been there in that regards, where you have one world collide with another world." Um, when you wrote that, were you trying to purposely create that drama there, where you forced specifically Max almost to having to make a decision one way or another? Or was it more for Kat's sake to kind of realize, did she make a mistake? Or was she right about following her own career over her love for Max?
Yeah, like I said, I had two endings to the book.
Okay, all right,
And one was the happy ending. We'll leave it there.
right,
The other
right.
one, according to some people that were commentating on my writing process, were no, you just can't do that, Matt. Matt, just don't. And what I found really, really interesting, and again, I'll be honest, it was a very emotional process. And when I found myself writing about the characters, particularly Max and Kat, I found myself crying. It was a very emotional process because I'd created these characters, and it became more emotional the more I got into the book. And halfway through the book, I was thinking down, and it was almost as if like I was treating these characters as if they were my children. I was trying to
Mhm.
think about what would be the right thing to do, and what would my mum be saying to me now if I phoned her up and said, "Look, mum, I'm at a crossroads in my life. I have a dilemma and I
Mhm.
don't know what to do. I don't know what decision to make, whether to go left, right, backwards, or forwards." My mum would always be the stable one that would make a sensible decision. And I found myself very, very emotional at times writing the story about these characters, particularly, as I said, with Max and Kat. So I wanted the ending to be the ending that
Mhm.
ended up in the book, but I didn't want it to sort of flow or fall into that predictability from halfway, which is why I kept the suspense. You won't
Yeah.
if you when you buy a copy of the book and you start reading and you get to where you were, it's like, no, Max, don't do that. Don't be an idiot. Make the right decision. Choose the
Yeah.
right girl, and your life will be happy again. I wanted.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted people to be doing. I wanted people to be almost like you said, screaming at the TV or screaming at the book, trying and
Yeah.
that Max hears what you're trying to say. Don't make that decision, Max. Don't make the wrong decision now. You've got to make the right decision, and I'll leave it there. Um,
Yeah.
so I wanted
Yeah.
it. Won't find out what happens to all of the characters and where their lives end up until the last chapter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can attest to that,
Yeah.
I found, and just to, again, I don't want to give too much, but for me personally, um, like I said before, all these characters somewhat flawed, um, and it takes, and for me, um, when Max um, finally gets to the summit of Mount Ayadeka,
Yeah,
and he realizes that he forgot his phone, and he's kind of like, do I go back and get the phone, or do I just continue with my journey? um and I'll just say that he decides not to go back and continues with the journey. Me personally, that was the turning point for Max. That was the point where he said, it's he decided that he became a little selfish and said, I need to continue this for me, not for anybody else. And I think that, because I personally feel if he went back, he may have not continued the journey for whatever reason it could have been. I feel that for him, he needed to continue the journey to find out who he really was.
yeah,
There's some undertones to that I'm not going to get into, but I don't know if I hit the nail on the head with that or not.
yeah.
Um,
Max is quite a selfish character.
yeah,
Because he's a lone wolf.
yeah,
He
yeah,
rides his own, and he doesn't need too many people around him. Very similar to me. There's a lot of the character in me that I am
yeah.
a I move in a very, very small circle of family and friends because I've
Mm-hmm,
learned over the years that the more people you have around you, the more chaotic your life can get. Which is why
mm-hmm.
Max, from his life experiences, which are explained in the book, we won't give that away because there's some
Yeah,
great twists in there that explain to the reader why Max behaves the way he behaves and why he acts in the way that he acts. But yeah, you're right. When Max reaches the summit of Mount Ajyadeka and he plods on, leaving everyone back in England for 7 days, not knowing where he is, Max doesn't
mm-hmm.
think that's a problem because Max doesn't care at that stage.
Yeah, yeah,
He's on a journey to find himself, and he knows where his life is going, regardless of what other people are saying or what other people are thinking, or how all his friends and family back in England are becoming more and more worried about his whereabouts and his safety. Max doesn't care
mm-hmm.
because he knows he's okay, and in Max's
Yeah,
mind, everything's okay as long as Max is okay, and that
exactly.
and if that's come across in at that point of the book, then that's to me that's brilliant because that's what I wanted people to understand is that yeah, Max is going to get his girl, he's going to get his happy ending. Sometimes he doesn't always deserve it because he's a selfish individual.
Exactly.
Can sometimes be a little bit like me, but Max has got the character to get away with it, and he knows that. And
Yeah,
Charlie, friend, knows it,
yeah,
and quite often explains to Max that you're dangerous, Max. You're dangerous. You're a good-looking lad that can have any girl on the island, and you know that. But you're dangerous because you're also selfish and you're stubborn, and you'll do the things that you want to do when you want to do it. And that is Max.
yeah, yeah. So, so during in the book, you mixed up the humor side and then there's tenderness side, and they seem to balance each other out in this. Um, how did you approach that balance? Was it something that just came naturally, or were you purposely going for uh, that you needed to interject that humor? Because was there a sense that it may have been too dark if you didn't put the humor in there?
It was always going to be there was always going to be humour in there because that's the way I decided to write the book. I wanted it
Mm-hmm.
to be a very typical British. People have compared it to Love Actually, Four Weddings and a Funeral. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of typical British production. Colin Firth,
Sure,
Hugh Grant, good guy, bad guy, floppy hair kind of movie with a love
mm-hmm.
twist and a few problems thrown in. So I'd kind of
Sure.
modelled it around the type of books and the type of films that I like watching. Stuff that is not too serious, but is not too stupid, if that makes sense. So I wanted the book to come across like that, but I didn't want it to be wishy washy. I wanted at certain
Okay.
points throughout the book the characters to remind people that you have to walk the tough yards in life sometimes
Mm-hmm.
before you find your happy ending, and that you may make reference, the introduction of Kat's new friend in London called Megan, who comes from that troubled past. So it wasn't intentionally made up to put a downer on the read. It was there just to remind people that even though someone may be smiling and they may look happy on the outside, they may be hurting and they may be burning on the inside. Because I've met people like that. I've been there at a point in my life when I was happy on the outside and burning and falling apart on the inside. So I wanted to remind people that you're reading a book that's going to give you an insight into Corfu. You're going to be able to buy into the characters and fall in love with your favourite character and follow them through. From start to finish, be introduced to new characters all along the way. Every other chapter, there's a new character coming in. They only come in for a couple of chapters and then drop out again. But I wanted to connect with everyone on all walks of life. I didn't want it to be just a pure from start to finish roller coaster of champagne and rose tinted glasses and bubble baths. I wanted it at certain points in the book to trigger people to think, yeah, it's okay for me to be going through a tough time, because as long as I can get through this, then there'll be sunshine on the other side of it. And that's the same with Megan, the same with Lucy. That was the reason why those characters were written into the book, and that's why they had their troubles.
Yeah. So you talked about some, when you were writing it, some things just you wrote very quickly. Some took a little bit time. Was there a particular chapter that was more difficult than the others?
Yeah, the last chapter, chapter 44.
Okay.
Because I wanted the finale to finish in one chapter, which is why chapter 44 is the longest chapter at nearly 4,000 words, where all the other chapters have been based in around sort of 2,200 to 2,500, no more than 3,000. So I wanted it so that someone could pick the book up and in 5 or 10 minutes read a chapter, 10 or 15 minutes read a couple of chapters, without getting halfway through a chapter of 5,000 words and then putting the book down and then having to start again. I wanted it to be a holiday read. That was one thing I wanted it to be, a holiday read. Pick it up, read for 15 minutes, blast through a couple of chapters, put it away and enjoy the sun. But in answer to your question, the last chapter was very, very difficult for me to write because I didn't want to say goodbye to the characters. And that's what I was doing. I was this is where I explained it became a very, very emotional process of writing, that sometimes I would be writing about Max or Kathy or Charlie or Lucy, and I would find myself crying. And that's not fishing for sympathy and to sell books. That is literally, it was an emotional journey writing this book. And that's one reason why I think the book only took just under 4 months to write, there or thereabouts, day in, day off. So it was a very emotional period of my time writing this book, of my life. But yeah, the last chapter was very, very difficult to write because I'd spent 3 months following and creating these lives. This is how I explained it to someone. They said, well, how are you finding the process of writing a book? And I said, actually, I'm finding it very easy because I love these characters. I'm steering them through the directions that they have to go. And I know where I want Max to be, and I know where I want Charlie to be, and I know where I want Megan to be, and I know how I want Lucy's ending to be, and I know how I want it to be for Kat at the end, and also Grant Fisher, the property developer, and Fabio, the marketing guy. These characters were born out of my observations on life, which were basically collected on my travels around the world. There is a bit of someone in every single character that I've written about, and that's something I've met somewhere along my journey.
Yeah.
The last chapter, I didn't want it to end. I could have written all night.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult trying to find an ending that gave the book the ending that I wanted. So yeah, it's got to be the last chapter because I was crying when I wrote the final word.
Yeah.
It was almost saying goodbye to the characters.
Yeah, understood. Did you find writing about Max self-therapeutic in some way?
Yeah, I can answer that without any hesitation, which is why it was so easy and so quick for me to create and write the character. Because I think you asked me this question when we got started, but I don't know whether I gave you the complete answer. Max is 95% me.
Yeah.
So if you pick up a copy, if you buy a copy of my novel, A Corfu Love Affair, from start to finish, from front cover to back cover, you are going to be in my life.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, by the time I got to the end, I I felt like I knew Max, because I think there's a part of Max in everybody. Especially, like I said, if you're in any type of relationship, these are the trials and tribulations that Max had, even Kat had in this book, are part of the human experience. The ups and downs, the self-doubt. In one part of the book, when Kat is talking about her new career, there's some imposter syndrome there. Did she belong at this new job? It's very, very, these characters are very relatable, almost as they're, Max could be me, Max could be one of my friends, and that's what makes this book so great. You talked about earlier, you touched base how you kind of wrote this in the style of like Love Actually, or and all the other British movies that are out there. If this movie ever got adopted into a film, what elements of the book would you be most protective of in that adaptation?
Whew. Now, just like Max, I'm quite stubborn. I
Okay.
wouldn't want anybody ripping my manuscript apart, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also very aware of the fact that I don't think any large production company would take it on without wanting to rewrite it. They would, I
Mm-hmm.
think, they would take the framework of it,
Sure.
but I think like a lot of great stories and a lot of great books end up becoming good films.
Yeah.
And I've read a few books that have been made into films and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always found that the book has always been better than the film. Uh,
Sure.
and quite a bit of it, in fact, a little bit of where the character Max came from is one of my favourite films, features Russell Crowe. It's called A Good Year.
Mm-hmm.
And Russell Crowe is a stockbroker in London, very successful stockbroker. And he goes through a life-changing experience when his uncle, who lives in a chateau in France, dies. And Max, that's the
Mm-hmm.
character that Russell Crowe plays in the film A Good Year, inherits his chateau and the vineyards. And
Mm-hmm.
Max is adamant that he doesn't want to change his life and live in France, in Provence,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually does end up falling in love with France. And he actually falls in love with a beautiful French girl called Fanny Chanel. So Max
Mm-hmm.
allows himself to dip his toe into the provincial way of life, and then realizes that, yeah, he doesn't need to be a successful stockbroker in London. So there's an element of that, because that film, A Good Year, is my favourite film ever, ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if you've seen it, but it's my favourite film.
Yeah. I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautifully
Yeah.
shot. Characters are wonderful. So there is an element of that film written into the way that I've written A Corfu Love Affair, because that's
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff that inspired me. But I've read the book and I've seen the film. And as
Yeah.
much as I like the film, the book came out before the film, and the book is better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The slightly more raw.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if I was ever offered the opportunity to put my novel into a TV series or a film, it would probably be beyond my wildest dreams. It's not something. Well, I say that, and I'm happy to talk further about that possibility if you're interested in hearing about it. But at the moment, it's no more than a conversation with someone.
Sure.
But
Sure.
if I ever had the chance to put my manuscript into a film, I would probably have to say yes.
Yeah. Now, if let's say that opportunity is given to you, and they said, "Hey, we'll give you, you know, we'll let you be in it. What character would you want to play?"
Oh, that's an interesting question. That is.
So, if I were to put you, if I was the executive producer and I'd put you in it, I'd put you um, as Costa in, in the tavern there.
Yeah.
I think that's where I would put you.
Yeah, Costas is a dear friend of mine, and he's on that note. Costas is a real person. Um,
Okay.
yeah, Costas actually exists. Uh, it,
Okay.
a lot of the places that are mentioned and a lot of the people that are mentioned, particularly
Yeah.
on Corfu, are real places and real people. So
Hmm.
Costas does actually exist. He is a real
Yeah.
person, and his place in the village of Daphnatta is called Costas' Place, and everyone knows it.
Yeah.
It's Costas. In the same way, David and Marika, who own and run the merchant house in Old Berithia,
Hmm.
they are friends of mine. They are real people.
Yeah.
Tom Giotis and his family, who own Forest Taverna in the village of Old Berithia, he is a real person. and a friend
Uh-huh.
of mine. So yeah, to play Costas, I think would be interesting. I would have perhaps opted for Charlie, which is Max's best friend,
Sure.
because
Okay.
I would like the opportunity, knowing that whoever was playing Max as
Yeah.
Charlie, I could be doing my best to try and keep myself
Yeah.
or Max on the right path, because that's what Charlie does from start to finish. He's always
Mm-hmm.
standing on that hill with Max, trying to give Max the best advice, because he loves Max with all his heart, and that's clear in the book. You know, we've got chalk
Yeah.
and cheese characters here.
Yeah. And the funny thing, I have this for some reason when I read books like that, and I think about, I always have how this would be seen on whether it's on the big screen or on television, who would play each character. It's just how I read books and how I envision it.
Mm,
Cat's father, Adrian Dunbar.
yeah, yeah. And I would probably, if we're gonna play tag here, if we're gonna tag team
Sure,
characters,
sure.
I think somebody like Emily Blunt would be perfect for Cat.
Yeah. And Max would play, and I would have Max be played by Henry Cavill.
Okay, interesting choice. And
Right?
Lucy, we're doing well. We're keeping on here. Lucy is
Yeah.
the flamboyant blonde bombshell that lives a very false life, as you will find out in the book. But actually, just wants to find a nice guy. So who would play Lucy? I'm not quite sure. That's a difficult one. That's a difficult one. I don't know many blondes. I'll hand that one back over to you.
So looking back now at this book, it's been out for some time now. Is there anything that you would change about the story, or something you'd consider exploring, but you ultimately left out?
I don't think so, to be honest.
Okay.
Which I think my decision behind that is cemented in the fact that it was so easy to write.
Mm-hmm.
If I tried to change it, or if I was to, with online publishing, I could go in and change this story and re-release it, and no one would know.
Sure.
It was to read the first edition and the second edition. Book publishing is so flexible now. But I think the answer has to be no. I wouldn't change anything, because the fact that the story was so easy to write, and the characters were so real, and everything just flowed so nicely. If I was to try and rewrite it, I think you would notice that someone was trying too hard to write it. And that may come across as a little bit, goody you for finding it so easy, writing 120,000 words in 3.5 months. It was something, I didn't have to try hard to write it, which to me meant that at some point in my life, this book, as it was written, was going to be written, and it had to be written in the way it was. The whole story came together within a few days.
Yeah.
I knew every milestone along the way. All I had to do was sit down every day or every other day or whenever, and just add the flesh to the bones.
Yeah.
That was the process.
Yeah.
So would I rewrite it? Would I change the ending? Would I bring in more characters? Would I reinvent the characters? Would they be different? No. This little thing here that was written with all my heart and soul has come out to be probably more perfect than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well, it's the book I never ever thought I would write.
Yeah.
Because as I explained earlier in our podcast, I left school with no qualifications.
Yeah. Yeah.
No qualifications. And for a new author, this is the first book I've written. For me, people turn around and say, well, how many books have you written? Like, what have you written before this? And I haven't. I just woke up one day and decided to write a book. Yeah. Went out driving around in my van and wrote the first chapter. And every time I went out in my van for a couple of hours a day, I wrote another chapter and another chapter in my head. And it just came. It must have been in me from somewhere, somewhere way back in history. This book was going to be written. Like everything that happens in my life. Yeah. I reinvent myself over and over and over again. And becoming Matt Wells, published author of A Corfu Love Affair,
Yeah.
was probably written into my journey.
Yeah,
So no,
exactly.
I wouldn't change it. I
Well,
wouldn't change it.
As a reader, I wouldn't change it either.
Thank-
So, changing topics here, we talked about this. Is you're going back? You're going to sail to Corfu from England?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay.
That's no easy task, and I know.
That's what I was saying when you were talking about going back to Corfu and
Yeah,
sailing. I'm like, is he going from England to Corfu?
no, that's not an enjoyable passage, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. You know your geography, you know the challenges involved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The brief history behind the sailing aspect of my life is my wife and I are both qualified sailors.
Okay.
We've
Okay.
been sailing 6-7 years now. I was introduced to sailing by Emily, that's my wife's father-in-law. He took us on a sailing flotilla, and from there on, I just fell in love with the idea of sailboats that they offer. So I then set about getting my own qualifications, my ICC, my flotilla skipper license, day skipper, coastal. So no, the sailing aspect is basically as people would rent a motorhome, we rent a yacht, we charter a yacht. And my wife and I, we've been fortunate to sail in Thailand, the British Virgin Islands, Croatia, the Ionian Sea, the Aegean Sea, all around. We've been in Martinique and St. Lucia as well in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But no, when we go sailing in Corfu, we fly out to Corfu from Yorkshire, from Teesside, and we spend a week or so on the island of Corfu, and then we charter a yacht out of either Benitez or Gouvier. And a couple of weeks, I'll be flying out to Corfu with my family, and we're taking a boat out of Gouvier, and we're going to circumnavigate the islands of Corfu, Paxos, Antipaxos.
Very
so
nice.
We'll be away.
Very nice. Maybe when you return, you'll have another novel.
Maybe. The idea is there. The follow-up to A Corfu Love Affair is there. And it will, for those that have loved my characters, Max and Kat and Lucy and Charlie, if you've loved the characters, it will be the same characters coming back in, minus a couple maybe. But that will provide the slightly darker elements to the story, as with this one. But yeah, there is a follow-up.
Yeah.
It's already kind of planned in my head.
Yeah. I'm just curious, as we wrap up here, you mentioned how you were going to the island for years.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that was before you met your wife.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you took her there for the first time, what was her reaction?
It's an interesting short story without any sort of like dark or deep involvement here. I first visited Corfu with my first wife.
Okay.
So Emily is my second wife.
Right.
So this is my second time around. This is my second chance to get it right.
Right.
Now you're smiling because you're I think you're picking that up in the book, maybe. So yeah, I'm very, very happily married to Emily. But when I first visited Corfu, that was with my first wife.
Right.
My first wife and I separated, and then very amicably, decided to go our separate ways and divorce. I didn't go to Corfu for a while.
I can understand that.
Yeah, it was parked up for a while.
Yeah.
And I go back, just like Max, who hadn't been to Corfu for a while. He wanted to go back. He was feeling the draw of the island, and it was going to make his life better. So I was very reluctant to say to Emily, my second wife, oh, let's go to Corfu, because I knew that she would probably say, oh, have you been there before? Yes, I have. Oh, who with? Well, I went there with my ex-wife. So I didn't want her to start thinking, oh, so we're going back and I guess we're going to be visiting all the places that you've been to before and nothing has changed for you except the person you're with. So I kind of avoided that for a while.
Okay.
But Emily and I have been very transparent with our previous lives and our history. The first day we got together and the first day we became a serious item, we put our cards on the table and, Emily said to me, well, I'm younger than you. I'm going to want children, so you need to take that on board. And I said, well, okay, I've already got some children, but I don't see that being a problem moving forward. And my whole thought on having more children completely changed. And Emily and I do have our own child now called Dylan, who'll be 16 in a couple of weeks. Okay. So that was our little happy ending. Yeah. Emily and I married in 2009, and Dylan was born in late 2009. And we've been a little family of three, very happily living together ever since. So yeah, but when I got the opportunity to go back out to Corfu,
Yeah.
and this time with Emily for my happy ending with Dylan, our son, we visited a few places that I'd been to because I was keen to show Emily and Dylan. And there's no hang-ups there. It's just another chapter of my life.
Yeah.
And Emily made it very clear to me when we got together. You know, she said, "I want children. You need to, you know." Emily's 14 years younger than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So made it very clear. She said, "You might not want any more children, but I want children.
Yeah.
So if you don't want children, we're going to be no more than friends. Simple as that." So I had to get my head around that process. And she also said, "If you cheat on me, you'll never see me again."
Yeah.
So it's kind of, the all was laid out fairly, you know, from day one.
Like you said, extremely transparent.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be.
Yeah.
As we've discussed, you know, everyone has differences in their life, but that's what makes relationships stronger, I believe.
100%.
Or it can divide them, as you will read in the book.
Yeah. 100%. Well, listen, Matt, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute.
The book is A Corfu Love Affair, and it can be found Amazon, I'm assuming, and everywhere else.
Yeah, this is what you're looking for. The artwork was commissioned by myself, and a friend of mine, an artist called John Todd, actually painted the picture for me in watercolors to use on the book cover. So that is the original artwork as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can buy the book on Amazon for Kindle. It's now available in paperback, which is already selling very well.
Very good.
And you can also buy it in a HTML PDF download copy as well, which gives you numerous copies. That's on Buy Me a Coffee. So if you go to Buy Me a Coffee, A Corfu Love Affair, you can download the HTML PDF, and you can also buy copies of the artwork as well. So all the original artwork purchase that go with the book, the accompanying map that goes with the book, that is only available on Buy Me a Coffee. But if you want Kindle or paperback, you'll find them on Amazon.
Excellent. So for Baklava and Banter, I am Petraki. I want to again thank author Matt Wells for coming on the show. And until next time, be good to each other, and we will see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.